We're talking about what Russia's up to on this episode after planes violated Estonia's airspace. But first, Laura is not in the BBC. She's out there in another location.
I am in Dorset. I am in Bournemouth, where I've been speaking to Sir Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, who marched into his conference. More of that later. And that interview will be on the broadcast round tomorrow on our programme tomorrow morning. But today we've got lots of things to talk about. And I've got a question for you, Paddy.
I'm ready.
Which is a strange question to ask you. Have you ever wondered what Chris might sound like if he was on Country File?
I think he'd sound like a hand in a glove.
By the way, the other thing we could just see whilst I was listening to the conversation there was a huge bird of prey flying over Chequers.
Metaphor alert. It's a kite.
We were just... well, we were thinking, is it a buzzard or is it a kite? Anyway, I'll leave sort of ornithology. Is that the right word?
Yes.
To others.
I love that. I love that very much. And I've learnt never to identify a bird ever.
We had emails about this from newscasters. Maurice said, the large birds noted at the Trump departure from Chequers are red kites, for which the Chilterns are well known. I always enjoy listening to your newscasts as I walk in the area. Thank you very much, Maurice. That's good to know.
And Angela Ashwin in Nottinghamshire says, thank you for your insightful reporting on the ins and outs of President Trump's visit. About the question of which bird of prey was flying over Chequers, a buzzard has a round edge to its tail feathers, whereas a kite has a distinctive V-shaped tail. With that bird news sorted, let's get underway with Saturday's newscast.
Hello, it is Laura in Bournemouth, and I must tell you, I'm sitting in the one spot on an outdoor terrace in a cafe that has cover. So to my left, it is chucking it down, raining, and to my right, it is chucking it down raining. So I'm rooted to the only spots in which I will not get drenched. These are the lengths, newscasters, to which we will go on your behalf.
Come to sunny Bournemouth for the Liberal Democrat conference they promised her. I'm Paddy here in the Newscast HQ in the studio. And hello to James Waterhouse, Ukraine correspondent in... Well, where are you, James? Because you're always on the move now.
Paddy, I'm in Kyiv, sat in front of a old map of Ukraine, which I occasionally like to point at authoritatively, like Blackadder.
I don't think it's quite how you point at it, but the map and the border is exactly the point. Tell us what has happened in Estonia.
Well, we have seen over Estonian airspace over the weekend 3 Russian fighter jets intercepted. That effectively means not being shot down, but being escorted off, if you like, out of Estonian airspace, a NATO member, by jets provided by the likes of Finland and Italy. And it is the second time this month that we have seen NATO members, Estonia now, Poland before, call on what's called Article 4, an urgent meeting of all members to talk about this latest violation by Russia. We've had condemnation from Europe, and we've heard Donald Trump say that he doesn't like it very much. But the question is now whether, as certainly some European members would like, the question is how stern a response will there be, as Moscow clearly is trying to kind of push the boundaries here.
James, when you say there'll be a discussion about what kind of stern response there might be, what are we talking about here? Because for newscasters, Article 4 is very, very different to Article 5. You know, that's the sort of big red button talking about potential action because an attack on one is an attack on all. So what is the range of responses do you think NATO will look at here?
Well, if you look at the American side of NATO, Laura, thus far, there hasn't been concrete action. Donald Trump's mind has not been changed, even by a state visit to the UK, to take more concrete actions against Moscow, either through further sanctions or heightened tariffs for its trading partners. In Europe itself, you know, we are seeing no-fly zones being policed by members in Polish airspace, Estonian airspace, but there is a real appetite to see more in a military sense, perhaps the intercepting of Russian drones from European airspace as they fly through Ukrainian skies. But this is the second time this has happened this month. We've seen 19 drones make their way into Polish airspace, much to the anger of the Polish leadership. We've suddenly seen a bit of political unity there. where they have said, look, we're not on the verge of war, said Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister, but he said we are the closest to war we have been since the Second World War. So I think there is a growing appetite here for there to be more of an intervention to stop Russia from testing NATO politically and militarily. But of course, it needs the backing of America to level up in that sense.
Mm. Here's what President Trump said.
Russian jets entered Estonia's airspace today for 12 minutes. Do you see that as a threat to NATO?
Well, I'm going to have to look at it. They're going to be briefing me in a short while, so I'll let you know about it tonight or tomorrow.
What's your take in general? Just being
I don't love it. I don't love it when that happens. It could be big trouble, but I'll let you know later. They're going to brief me in about an hour.
And a follow-up.
Russia, someone wiser than me put it, is rattling the doorknobs. It's letting NATO know with a drone over Poland, with a jet over Estonia, that it's seeing what we've got in the locker. And the reason that they're doing that, really, is because there seems to have been a sort of schism between the US security guarantee and the European security guarantee. And NATO is the vehicle that has kept the peace, and Russia has always respected / feared it. So any kind of suggestion that Donald Trump is inconsistent in dealing with the European powers and inconsistent in dealing with Moscow is the ideal time to test what we've got in the locker. So it's not difficult to see what Moscow's doing. All the old Kremlin watchers have told us this is totally predictable. Really, what it comes down to is things that will actually hurt them, like sanctions and the fact that Hungary, the EU member, buys oil from Russia, James. This is still Donald Trump's point. He can't really assist Europe till Europe assists itself.
Yeah, and many will argue that he's got a point. You know, why would America help, he says, if there are European states continuing to buy Russian oil and gas? You know, at some point in this full-scale invasion, more was being purchased than the value of economic and military aid that was being provided to Ukraine. So you wonder what scrambling there is going on in the background to try and entice or coerce Donald Trump into those tougher measures that you illustrate. But yeah, it might be obvious as to why Russia is flying drones in this way, sort of spilling outside the arena of this war. But there was also a fear that, yes, it poses uncomfortable NATO questions. The jury's out on Russia's military capability to say mount something beyond Ukraine, depending on what happens here. But it certainly sort of paves that political path ahead of what could be further conflict.
And James, it's always great to have you with us. And I remember not so long ago, we had an episode where we had a really long conversation about what was going on in Ukrainian public opinion. I just wonder, that's some months ago. Now Trump has sort of settled back into the White House and he's doing what he does and not being completely clear about willingness to go further on Ukraine, although he, sometimes seems to say all the right things. And Keir Starmer sort of, you can almost hear him inside his head going, phew, thank goodness he said something rude about Vladimir Putin. But now the sort of Trump reality that there isn't quick, strong, radical moves from him to try and bring this to an end. And of course, we've had the Putin visit. How would you describe what it feels like being in Ukraine right now?
So I came back last week after a few weeks sort of across Europe covering the attempted peace talks. And I think that ambiguity is now being embraced by Ukraine. We went to a briefing a couple of days ago in the foreign ministry, and at times it seemed like a fundraiser. They were talking about urging allies to contribute more money for their drone production, to help prop up their economy. The Economist reckons it costs around $140 million per day for Ukraine to keep fighting this war. I asked the spokesman about the so-called coalition of the willing. What are Ukraine's European allies able to provide once a ceasefire, if a ceasefire is ever reached? How is the White House reacting to your calls for striking deeper into Russia or stationing Western troops inside Ukraine? And the detail just isn't forthcoming. It is a depressing rhythm that I have seemingly returned to. The costs are no less for Ukraine, and the sirens are the worst I have seen them when we are seeing north of 500, 600 drones launched.
James, did you say 600 drones?
600 would be an average number now. We are seeing, the Russians at the moment have the capability to manufacture hundreds every month. There were 500 last night. Thankfully, there wasn't a loss of life that's being reported by the different channels that we're looking at this morning. But we saw a ministerial building a couple of weeks ago hit in central Kyiv by not one but two Russian missiles in a very deliberate double tap, where one missile hits, emergency crews move in, and then it's hit again. We've seen the British Council building. The British Council building was hit by a double tap. We've seen the ministerial building office that we can see from this hotel roof struck. This is the heart of Kyiv, where the main air defences are stationed. But when we're talking about these kind of numbers and the ambiguity from America, and we are seeing deliveries that were promised by the Trump administration for European partners to deliver to Ukraine, those deliveries are starting to get held up, and it impairs Ukraine's ability to protect itself, not least alongside the fight on the battlefield.
Well, once again, we are educated by hearing you, James, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Paddy. Thanks, Laura.
Those of you who are eagle-eyed, who are watching, will see that I have moved, and I'm now sitting in the dark, but I'm no longer getting drenched. So there we are. Let's proceed with the second part of our conversation.
Well, actually,
we are talking about...
No, before we do that, let's just say that does evoke, for me, as a fan of Brexit cast, the early days when you'd be in a taxi, Chris would be in a cupboard, and, suddenly here you are in a sort of dark cafe with 1920s silhouettes behind you. I love it already.
You love it already? Oh, my goodness. Well, that's a lot of pressure then. So Jeremy Corbyn, he formerly of Labour's Parish. Zarah Sultana, also formerly of Labour's Parish. Two people on the left of the Labour Party, or certainly the left of politics, both no longer in the Labour Party. Some time ago, they decided to get together, the old left and the new left, off they go and start their own new political project. However, it has been beset with problems from the beginning. They couldn't agree when to start it. They still haven't decided what it's going to be called. And then this week, there was a huge bust up over party's membership. And let me just explain what happened, because I want to get this right. Zarah Sultana had posted on her social media account encouraging people to join up and pay money as members. But then Jeremy Corbyn said that was unauthorized. And they had a huge big row. She then went on social media and said that there was I paraphrase, a clique of terrible people who'd acted in a terrible way towards her, and they'd behaved like a boys' club, and the whole thing was grisly.
Yes. So it had this desperate start when they couldn't agree who'd started it and when, and now it's got a bad middle, or stage one, phase one, we should call it perhaps, where they've had a row over who can appeal to the membership and how.
That's right. And it's got very, 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 very nasty. And through the power of X, she sort of pops up every now and again to complain about what's happened. But it does seem a real mess. Jeremy Corbyn, though, has to put out a statement this afternoon. Jeremy Corbyn speaking at the annual conference for the Peace and Justice Project, his organisation. He's denied that he and other independent MPs were controlling or directing the group, despite what some people have endlessly been discussing on social media. That sounds a bit like Zarah Sultana. He said the party, which still doesn't have an official name, but currently goes by Your Party, would have a founding conference in November, and it would provide a real alternative. He acknowledges the process has been quite difficult over the last few days. And the problem here is, look, a lot of people disaffected with the Labour Party who have left-wing tendencies were really excited by the prospect of some kind of new vehicle where they could join up and talk about what they would see as an alternative vision to what they would also see as this sort of staid centrist vision of Keir Starmer in number 10. But they've just not been able to get their act together. And it has very quickly descended to something that looks quite chaotic, where there's lots and lots of disagreement. And of course, in the other bits of the Labour Party, I have to say there is not a small amount, quite a large amount of pleasure at their displeasure.
Yes, because it looks like splitters and plotters. And the left broadly often been, celebrated by supporters for leading social change, but mocked by critics for kind of loving arguments with itself and going into new factions sort of all the time. Is it the end of Your Party?
Well, I like having parties. So, I mean, if you're talking about whether or not I'm ever going to have a party, that's a different kind of party. Sorry, I'm being facetious. No, I don't think it is the end, because Jeremy Corbyn has a sort of well of affection, and he can still sort of create excitement among a certain contingent of people on the left of politics. Zarah Sultana also has a certain amount of affection and excitement among some people on the left. I think it does appear that there is going to be some sort of vehicle, but it's very hard to see how anytime soon they're going to become a coherent force. And just remember, what sort of happened in the background to all of this. There are a small number of Labour MPs who got booted out of the party for voting against the leadership and not doing what they were told. There are also a small number of independent MPs, like the MP who unseated Jonathan Ashworth, who was a very prominent Labour figure in his Leicester constituency. So there is a political grouping of people who need a home. They could all carry on independently, but there is potential there for a home, a sort of well in which to pour that kind of sentiment. So I think there will be some sort of vehicle there, but that's a million miles away from turning into a sort of coherent campaigning force that could actually do damage to the Labour Party in terms of its political success. And remember also, you've got the Green Party having a new leader who is punchier, who calls himself an eco-populist. So there is another organisation, and the Green Party they're a pretty big political party these days. They are organised. They've been fighting elections for a long time. And it's possible that some of the people who might have looked at your party actually might be attracted to go to Zach Polanski's group instead. So, there's a lot at stake in a politics that is complicated now, where there are all sort of colours of the rainbow. But I mean, I don't think your party have got to the stage of deciding what colour their logo is going to be, let alone deciding what name there's going to be, or indeed who's going to lead it. And I think what probably is over is that hope that the sort of firebrand of the old left, Jeremy Corbyn, could have a sort of happy political marriage with the firebrand of the young left under Zarah Sultana. So it's hard to see how they are going to now have a happy and successful, productive political partnership, even though there still might be a sort of political party at the end of this. Sorry, that was very, 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 very long. It's like the old newscasts.
Well, no, I'll be tested. I'll happily be tested on what you said if you think I wasn't listening. Because it made me think that really it's hard to escape the feeling that post-Brexit, there's been a centrifugal force on British politics. So the right has fractured, the left has fractured, because the old certainties changed during that civil war, really, among parties about whether we were in or out, where we stood on Remain and Leave. And that reminds me, I don't want to relitigate Brexit, but basically it's fair to say all political parties are coalitions within themselves, aren't they? So all that's really happening is a sort of different colour of red. It's trying to see how many supporters it can get while there's a Labour government.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But remember, a lot of them are people also who feel that Keir Starmer shoved them out of the Labour Party, booted them out, wanted them out. He and his acolytes acted ruthlessly and badly to try to push them out. So there's a lot of bad blood here. It's not as simple as, we don't quite agree, so we're going to go off and have our own new project. There is a lot of grudge, a lot of unhappiness, but as you said, the left and the right in a different kind of way. The left, by their own admission, I think every Labour MP, and I haven't asked every single Labour MP, but I think every Labour MP would admit that actually, in general, people in left-wing politics are pretty good at making fights amongst themselves.
David Blunkett said that to me on BH recently. And on the subject of what to call your party, because your party is only a standby name for this new grouping, have you seen what Skate on Discord has suggested? Have you got the same message as I've got?
Torna party.
Torna party. Your party.
Boom, boom. See what he did there? Other answers suggestions will also be gratefully received. We are also going to ask you for some other answers, and we've got a quiz, Paddy.
I'm ready to go. It's guess the marching band, because has Ed Davey had a marching band at the conference?
He has had a marching band. So he arrived with a marching band. And if you are listening to this podcast rather than watching this podcast, I do highly recommend going to the BBC News website to have a look at the picture of Ed Davey arriving at his conference with a marching band. But there have been lots of other marching bands this week, have they not, Mr. O'Connell.
They have, because, of course, there was the state visit of the US president, so he had a marching band. So we're playing Guess the Marching Band. Was this Ed Davies marching band or a royal marching band? Number one. Now, that's the famous YMCA, and here's marching band number two. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I think it's pretty easy. I mean, it would be Extraordinary Britain, famed for pomp around the world, if we couldn't tell which one of those was actually a military band and which was Ed Davies.
Well, I don't know. I think we should leave people guessing. I think we should ask newscasters and then we can reveal the answer tomorrow. Don't finish the excitement. I mean, so much of what we do is exciting. You know, be a journalist. It'll be exciting, they told me. Little did I know I'd be sitting in the dark and the rain, holding a microphone, trying not to get my laptop destroyed, playing that famous parlor game, Guess the Marching Band. So I think we should keep the anticipation building and only tell people tomorrow morning.
Okay, and then we'll vote also for which one to end tomorrow morning's edition, Band A or Band 1 or Band 2. Laura, look, you've been an amazing rock. You've come in from the sands, the sunny sands, drenched, and you're in a cafe with a 1920s mural in the dark.
Actually, I've been terribly moaning. It's always a joy to talk to you and to talk to our wonderful audience of listeners and viewers, so I mustn't complain. It has been a vintage newscast outing for me, and it's a while since I've done one. So good to get back to the shambles.
So you've got Ed Davey on BBC One tomorrow.
We do, and the Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy before he goes off to the New York UN General Assembly. We may also be speaking to someone on the ground in Gaza, and we are also, I spoke yesterday, this was really fun, to Andrew Lincoln and Alicia Vikander, the incredible Oscar winner, hugely successful actor, all of those things. It was a real pleasure to meet them, and yeah, I talked to him, Jimmy Kimmel as well, so you'll hear that tomorrow morning.
Lovely, and we will be speaking to, we will be covering the upcoming recognition of the state of Palestine by the UK, which is what you're nodding your hat to there. And also we're doing an update on playlists and dementia. The link, one of our listeners raised £1 million who has dementia, plays the piano. We're doing an update on the link between helping people with dementia through music. That's a taste of the future, but for the past 30 minutes, thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye.